It's heating up out here for this June edition of Local Image. Hello everyone, I'm Judy Sky Voss and I'm at Lake Elmo Regional Park Reserve where things got hot but not out of control during a recent fire burn. We'll find out why parts of this park were put to the flame a little later. Right now, let's find out why the parking lot in front of White Bear Lake City Hall was full of activity one Saturday in May as we bring you this Local Image story.
Do you know how many gallons of water you flush every time you flush your toilet?
Many people don't think much about the water they send down the drain on a daily basis, but it might be time to start.
Why now? Why not now?
The city of White Bear Lake recently held a water conservation expo.
And we're here to promote water conservation and clean water initiatives, rain gardens, things you can do to clean your stormwater. And promote water conservation, reducing your water usage.
First of its kind event for the city that drew organizations from all over that are dedicated to reducing water usage and promoting good environmental stewardship.
We're here to talk to people about water, everything from groundwater to lakes and rivers and streams, what they can do to keep lakes clean, how they can do beautiful landscaping in their own yards that actually helps to protect the groundwater that we drink as well as the lakes that we fish from, and get people having fun.
Yeah, I think a lot of people really want to do their part. They just don't know how to make that first step, and we have a lot of great resources to help them make that first step.
Even for the youngest attendees.
Especially when you have families and children, you really want to get them interested in the environment early. And so we've brought, lots of different activities for kids to start making that connection to water as well. And there you go, you have your own little dragonfly.
There is a reason water conservation is important.
There's such a close connection actually here in this area for surface and groundwater that the water that runs off your property and everything it picks up really goes directly into your drinking water with just some minimal filtering. Watersheds are unique in that we don't follow political boundaries. Our boundaries are actually determined by the direction water flows. And we're kind of a bathtub shape, so wherever the water lands, as long as it flows to an outlet, that defines our boundaries.
Minnesotans have been concerned about lakes and rivers for a long time. It's something that we really value, but a lot of us, I think, had this impression that there was just an endless supply of groundwater, and to realize that there isn't really was a wake-up call for people, and I've had a lot more people asking about how they can reduce their water use, how they can fine-tune their irrigation systems, questions that they weren't asking even 5 years ago.
And these questions become even more important during the summer months.
We perhaps double our water usage in the summer, and that's primarily due to irrigation. So anything we can do to reduce that irrigation load and reduce the draw on our aquifers is really important. So rain barrels would be a great example. You can capture the water off the roof and use that to irrigate your plants.
Another rain barrel.
Way to go! Good for you!
Fill it up, let's hope for rain now.
Conservation of water is the cheapest, and it will always lower the cost of whatever else gets implemented.
What you plant or don't plant can have a big impact on regional water.
It's flooding this whole field.
Oh my goodness! And what's happening over here in the river? So what happens when we change from a natural land area and we pave it over, we get a lot more water coming down here, don't we?
Native plants not only require less water, but also have other benefits.
So these are actually native seeds for our ecoregion, so for Minnesota plants. So it's got great things in there for our pollinators like monarch butterflies and honeybees and bumblebees and native bees, and then a bunch of other really good native seeds.
But what about that toilet in your home?
Anything before 1984 is either 5 or 7 gallons. This much water or this much water to remove 6 ounces of liquid, and we all do that 5 or 6 times a day. The waste of water is monstrous, and it wouldn't change our lifestyle at all to go from this to get a dual flush toilet and only flush 6/10 of a gallon to remove liquids each time. And we're still treating water in our houses like before there were cell phones. This is the only planet we have to live on. Without water, we can't live. I got 2 kids who are coming up and think they ought to have water to enjoy when they're my age. It's pretty simple.
On May 19th, a truck driver crossing railroad tracks in New Prague, Minnesota, collided with an oncoming train. The truck was dragged 600 feet along the tracks. Fortunately, the driver survived the collision, but all too often that is not the case. Reporter Mary Klein and photojournalist Nicholas Anderson spent a day riding a train in Minneapolis to bring us the perspective of a train engineer in this local image story.
We hit a vehicle that was parked too close to the tracks. Other than that, not yet.
Hopefully not.
Well, it's kind of a matter of time from what everybody says.
Joe Streifert has been driving trains for 12 years. He and Chad Hedin work together for Twin Cities and Western Railroad Company. One drives and the other conducts. It's a system that works well on the inside, but it's what drivers do on the outside that puts them at risk.
The lady that ran into us, she was messing around on her phone, she was speeding, and she had her kid in the back seat.
It really makes you think when the parents in front are going across and then you see the little kids looking up in the back and they don't have any control over that. Or the parents are talking on the phone and you're just kind of looking up at you. Sometimes you get that close that you'll see them.
A train collides with a car or person every 3 hours in the United States. 96% of deaths are the result of highway rail grade crossings or trespassing. But train engineers have little recourse. If a driver is distracted, impatient, and rolls the dice, they need to keep in mind a big train can take a mile to stop.
We do believe that a large majority of these incidents are preventable, and that's why we are here. That's why we do what we do.
Cheryl Cummings is the executive director of Minnesota Operation Lifesaver. The organization promotes the slogan, See Tracks, Think Train.
We want it to become something that's just as automatic as putting on your seatbelt when you get in the car.
Cummings says impatience, inattention, and ignorance are the main causes of collisions. As part of their educational mission, Minnesota Operation Lifesaver volunteers travel throughout the state providing free presentations.
It's not just about your life or your 1 minute that you're saving because you're trying to get across those tracks before the train comes. The reality is that it affects a lot of people.
Railroad crossings include passive and active signs. The crossbuck indicates it's legal to cross, but drivers must yield to trains. And active warnings include arms, flashing lights, bells, and whistles. Safety officials urge people to heed the warnings. Your impatience or inattention can change someone else's life forever.
When you're new, that's one of the first things you're going to ask. Well, have you ever hit anybody? Because obviously you're in a large vehicle and you want to know.
Yeah.
But generally, like a lot of the guys, especially if they've hit somebody, they generally don't want to talk about it.
Really?
Yeah, because it's a very helpless feeling.
I don't think they're thinking about the train. They're thinking about where they're going and how 3 seconds late that they're going to be if they have to stop and wait for it.
A couple of years ago, we brought you the story of two companies located in Venice Heights that were coincidentally both working on projects for the One World Trade Center in New York, which opened last October. One of those companies, Dufresne Manufacturing, recently received a very prestigious award, and we were invited to the celebration inside Jimmy's Event Center in Venice Heights, where we spoke with owner Bob Dufresne and others about the significance of receiving the Minnesota Business Performance Excellence Award based on the National Baldrige criteria.
The commitment of Dufresne Manufacturing to building up a more vibrant business community in our local area truly cannot be understated. Dufresne Manufacturing is an example of a community builder, a community leader, and we as a business community thank you. On behalf of the VHEDC Board of Directors, congratulations to you, employees of Dufresne Manufacturing, for your engagement in the Baldridge journey and the road you continue to travel. We are thrilled to journey with you, as the road you stride toward is a very bright one.
And when he talked about what you have done, it wasn't pride in his business, it was pride in the people that he was working with. It came through from the moment he came to our city council meeting, and we gave him a proclamation there at that time. The recession, that had to be an unbelievable obstacle. The sacrifices you made, and Bob referred to them at our city council meeting, the sacrifices you made to keep the business moving ahead. Thank you. On behalf of the city of Vadnais Heights, thank you to what you've done.
And be it further proclaimed that we declare today, May 1st, 2015, will forever be known as Dufresne Manufacturing Day in Ramsey County.
It's all about celebrating this journey that Dufresne's been on, and it's been for quite a while, and it's not going to end. They're going to continue the journey. But this was the time when they won the award, the Penn Award, first manufacturing company ever.
We're not supposed to have favorites, but we do. And this, of course, did not have any influence on your award. That is a high integrity process, but there is no doubt that working with Dufresne is one of the highlights of our experience in Penn. You have become an extension of our family. So you are in very elite company. This is hard work, and it's very transparent. And I think the very transparent nature of this work, you kind of throw open your doors for organizations to see what you're doing, is maybe something not all organizations are willing to do, and yet here you are saying, this is what we do, we believe in ourselves, this is the good work that we're at, and we're willing to share it. So whether you realize it or not, you have now become role models. All of you in the work that you do are role models for other organizations, particularly manufacturing in the state of Minnesota. Your focus on human development is second to none. And I said to Chris when I saw her, I said, Chris, we've got something really big here. Other organizations are going to be coming to you to find out what you are doing. You are part of a national movement to help organizations get better.
How are you feeling?
I'm feeling honored and blessed to be here. The people that represent Dufresne Manufacturing are just the greatest.
He is a visionary leader. He is very committed to his people. We call them members, not employees. He is, oh gosh, what could I say? He is very people-oriented. I've never worked for a company like Dufresne Manufacturing, and this is where I will retire.
I call myself a newbie at Dufresne. I've been there about a year and a half. And I remember when I was interviewed and I was asked, why Dufresne? Why would you come to Dufresne? And I said, because I saw a small company doing big things.
We started in 1991 in Shoreview for a couple of years, then we moved to Vadnais Heights. Next year we're going on our 25th year. We're in precision metal manufacturing is how we started. We hit a transition point in 2008 in the recession period. It was a difficult spot for us because it brought us to our knees and we had to downsize quite a bit. We're looking for a cure for this recession to prepare the company to be financially stronger and have more job security for our employees. We pulled in a consultant from the outside, Nancy Holdland, to do the training on it. We trained the senior leaders at Dufresne in the framework and criteria. It took weeks to learn it. And from that point on, we just started to develop a leadership system, and we just kept on training more people all along to this framework, this model that looks at your strategic planning, looks at your leadership, it looks at your customers, it looks how your knowledge and measuring the data within the company, it looks at your operations that you've got going on, it looks at your human resource, and finally, you have to have the results. And that's what the evaluators look at when they come in, which was in October. They did 160 interviews. They interviewed everybody in the facility more than once. And that's where we ended up getting this high score, and that's where they discovered 3 key processes, systems inside that ended up being best in practice.
PEN, so the Performance Excellence Network, is really many volunteers, business people that act as volunteers to go out and evaluate the company. So it's one thing to fill out a 50-page application, say we could do this. It's another thing for the evaluators to come into your business world and speak to every one of your employees and say, okay, tell us what you do. And they talk to us about what they saw. And what they deliver for you at that time it's called OFIs, Opportunities for Improvement. And which is really wonderful for an organization because, I mean, it can be real humbling too. You might think, oh, we're really great at this, and you find out, oh, you could maybe improve a little bit more. But that's a beautiful thing, and that's part of my role as the Baldridge Program Facilitator to really help us as we move forward, track the history, because we're going to apply again in the next year and a half. So we know we're going to keep up going up the ladder.
So Baldridge was started by President Reagan back in 25 years ago. He wanted to make manufacturing companies more competitive, so he hired Malcolm Baldridge to develop his framework. So he interviewed hundreds and hundreds of customers, clients out there, and looked for the criteria that made a very good manufacturing company. Over the last 25 years, it's gotten better and better, tougher and tougher, and now the states have adopted it. So this is the Minnesota Excellence Award based on the Baldridge framework that we were awarded. Since 2007, our employees have turned in 16,000 improvement ideas. 16,000 improvement ideas, the engagement. And when I interview those people, 7 out of 10 reasons why they look to make changes for the future for Dufresne is always for somebody else. It's not for themselves, it's not to make their job better, it's for someone else.
I do present this to you guys for all the hard work. You guys are in the office and manufacturing and engineering, customer service. You touch all the processes, you make all the processes. And all these words are for you guys out there too.
So that's just proof of the engagement and what you need in order to be the best, in order to be recognized at this level in world-class manufacturing.
It was 5 years ago on May 1st when Maplewood Sergeant Joe Bergeron was killed in the line of duty. Reporter Mary Klein takes us to a memorial in his honor and shares the memories of a witness to the shooting on the day Joe was killed in this Local Image segment.
Maplewood Police Badge number 357 and the corresponding 5.7 series shall be assigned to Sergeant Joseph Bergeron into perpetuity. This action honors the service and sacrifice of Sergeant Bergeron, who was killed in the line of duty on May 1st, 2010.
It was a Saturday morning, and oddly enough, I was on the golf course with my dad. We'd made it through about 10 holes, and I was having the round of my life. I just shot an eagle, I recall, and pretty horrifying experience on the 11th tee box when my mom got a hold of my dad on his cell phone, and one of those instances where right away you know something's terribly wrong. We live in a world where terrible things happen, and it's very nice when you meet people that are the kind of person you can rely on when terrible things happen, and Bill Langevin is one of those guys.
I was running on a Vento trail, going south on the trail, and a police car came up behind me, and I pulled over and let him pass. And at the time I didn't know the officer's name, but it was Sergeant Joe, and he smiled at me and I waved back to him, and he proceeded on. The worst day of my life, and I always remember that smile that Joe had there as he was smiling as he went past me, and 2 minutes later he was assassinated by 2 miserable individuals. And, it's something you always remember.
I'm very honored to be here, as I have for the past 4 memorials, and I probably will be here for the next memorial and so on until I won't be here, and then I'll probably be with Joe anyways.
Just made an impression on me, and I just I could never forget him, and just come here and honor him for a few moments, and I honor him every day when I go out running.
As I shared in the outset of today's show, here at Lake Elmo Region Park Reserve, things got a little heated when flames erupted on portions of the landscape recently. But it was no accident. It was a very coordinated and controlled burn done with a specific purpose, as we find out through this story from photojournalist Jeffrey Wilson.
So prescribed fire in our parks, we use it for a few different reasons. Number one is we use it to promote the growth of the native tallgrass prairie that we're trying to bring back.
The Washington County Parks Department is in the process of restoring tracts of land back to its natural state as it existed before European settlers began to change the landscape.
For the 1847 Public Land Survey notes for this park, it's described as timber scattering, burr, and black oak. Basically, that's saying that there was this savanna, big burr oak trees that grow up in an open environment, yet is maintained through the use of fire, which the Native Americans used not only in hunting game, but also that created this whole ecosystem of fire-dependent species on the land. Back in the 1990s, they seeded this site. Formerly, it was an ag field and with cropland and grazing and things of that sort. And after they took it out of production, they seeded it with native grasses and native flowers.
Prairie restoration includes many parts to make it work, and even affects the smallest of inhabitants.
They found ants to actually bring in flower seeds, which we call forb. And that forb depends upon the overwintering. So the ant grabs the seed inside the prairie and brings it into the colony and actually overwinters it. And that provides the germination it needs to either germinate on that mound or outside of it.
As part of the restoration, prescribed burns are being used to help promote growth of native species, while at the same time controlling that of invasive species.
And so that fire actually removes all the top growth that is present in the prairie from the previous growing season and returns all those nutrients back into the soil. A lot of people don't know that the prairie, most of the prairie's plants, all the plants you see above here is just a little part of the whole system below it. And there's prairie plants that their root systems go anywhere between 3 to 16 feet deep, and they're filtering water and any pollutants out of that.
Lots of planning and preparation go into ensuring that the burn is safe and effective.
Before we even get out here and are able to burn, it starts with me identifying where and when we're going to do that burn. We go to the Minnesota DNR and we actually get variance approvals from the region-wide forester for this area. That forester will then review our burn plans and actually come out to the site and ensure that they're safe to conduct a fire in. So the day of the burn, we meet out on site the night before, and during the night I'm checking the weather to make sure that the forecast is good for a burn day. We don't burn when there's 20 mile an hour, 30 mile an hour winds. We're only burning if it's less than 15. We're making sure that the humidity it's not too high where it's really hard to start a burn, but it's also not below 20 where we have a really bad fire hazard on there. At that time, the crew's already mobilizing out on site. They have the water trucks filled with water, and they have all the equipment that we're gonna need to conduct the day's burns. In addition to our mowed turf trails that we actually have a staff member go and cut down more of the prairie adjacent to those trails to establish a burn break. And that burn break doesn't necessarily stop the fire, it just gives us a little more time to ensure that it stays contained. And that's where we'll have a a truck come by and run what's called a wet line to wet that vegetation so the fire doesn't cross. There's all these different teams of people doing different things. Myself and my supervisor were working as the burn boss and weather observer, making sure that the weather wasn't changing on us and making sure everyone needed to be where they were at. And then you had a ignitions team, you call it, the guy with the fire torch who is out there actually lighting the fire. In front of him and behind him is a wet line team. So they're putting a wet line right behind the drip torch or ahead of it, depending on that specific crew. And then behind them, the next check is another vehicle where they have water in the back of the UTV, and they're checking to make sure that no fire is crossing into that fire break. So there's all these different checks in terms of the burn day to make sure that that fire isn't escaping.
An oak savanna is not complete without oak trees.
We have probably 100 or so bur oak seedlings throughout the prairie here, and we're hoping that we can at least get 50% of them to live and make it to those big bur oak trees that you often see when you come across a savanna landscape.
All this work goes to help protect a disappearing part of our local ecosystem.
These types of plant communities of prairie are actually very rare in this state. I mean, what remains, it's like less than 1% of what actually existed on the land prior to European settlement. So if you like to see the birds, the bees, and the other pollinators and amphibians and wildlife, they depend on this type of ecosystem that we're standing in.
The Outdoor Heritage Fund grant received by Washington County Parks will continue to help fund habitat restoration at this park and 2 others in the county, focusing on prairie and forest enhancement and 27 acres of wetlands enhancement here at Lake Elmo Park Reserve. Come out to the park and see what's happening for yourself. It's a beautiful place for a picnic, a bike ride, a swim, or camping and fishing. After all, it is summertime, and I hope you do enjoy yours. Please join me in July for more great local stories. And as always, I do thank you for watching Local Image.